Despite the best efforts of KJ Adams, Kansas loses at home again behind some faulty late play and a 3-point barrage from Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of LOJ, we recap KU losing to Texas Tech this time. Another home loss for KU, another loss for KU as they're in double figures at this point in time. What went wrong for KU in the game and has been going wrong really all season long that has led to this point in time. We'll get to game awards and what is next for the Jayhawks. And let me get this out of the way and say the effort level and some of the things that Kansas did were actually really good in this game. Like your ability to score inside and, winning the rebounding battle. And again, like the game that KJ Adams played, he was an absolute monster today. Double-double for KU. The amount of effort plays and hustle balls that he won for you, the scoring ability, it was phenomenal. The production you got from your two big men with KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson was phenomenal. Of course, the call at the end of the game, that was no good, but KU ended up getting the ball back, so whatever. That happens sometimes. This one, just, the lead guards weren't great for KU. In fact, they struggled to a very real extent, and I think to a certain extent, there is a bit of this game for me where it's a bit of the new reality, and hopefully this isn't a new reality we're going to see moving forward. Hopefully this is a bit of a new reality of just what it's been the past couple of years. Like at the end of the day, Texas Tech's a better basketball team than Kansas, both in terms of their style of play, the talent on the roster, how it's put together. Like they're just a better basketball team than Kansas. And so to a certain standpoint, you lost to a better basketball team. And yes, that is frustrating as a KU fan where you don't ever want to be in a position where you're like, yeah, we lost because we're the worst basketball team. No, it's Kansas. Like you should be building a roster year in and year out that is not having those sorts of things happen. And unfortunately, it is to that point. But to me, this loss comes down to really three main things. With the fourth one, I do want to at least discuss. But the first one is KU has kind of just lost all their clutchness at home. This year, it's just gone away. It continues to be amazing to me how poorly this team executes down the stretch. And in these key moments, especially, it's home or road, whatever, but especially at home, when you have literally the most experienced team in the country, you would think that it would put you in a better situation for those sorts of things. And you look at the three home losses for KU now, they're all very similar in that way. This one more similar to the West Virginia game, but they're all similar in that you had issues at the end of the game closing the game out. The Houston game, you couldn't close the game out with a lead. In the West Virginia game, you storm back, you tie the game, and then you foul them on a three-point shot. And it felt like Zeke Mayo was trying to be like, I'm going to do the Javon Small right here on that play. And then in this one, it was similar to West Virginia that you came storming all the way back, and then you couldn't close it out in a game that, you got tied at different points in time toward the end of the game. And it is just weird after all the years where Bill Self has won these close games and won these single-digit games or one-possession games, it's all gone out the roof this year. And the lack of execute, it's not just that, Kansas – they lost another game by 3 because they missed the game tying 3, or the other team hit a crazy buzzer beater 3 to beat them. It's like they're having execution issues too, right? Like fouling a guy like Javon Small, like you don't foul in that situation. Execution issues of throwing the ball out of bounds, like in late possessions in this one. It's execution issues that, not being able to get an inbound pass in against Houston, right? Those are execution issues. Those aren't just, you ran into you just missed a shot and they made a shot, right? To where you feel like, maybe it's going to reverse at some point in time. No, you're just not executing. And again, that is weird that it is this experienced team. The second part of this is guards win in March. We're officially in March now. It is March 1st. And guards win during the month of March. We talk about it all the time in the NCAA tournament. Well, Kansas doesn't have the guard play. They just don't. And you look at Texas Tech, who does have the guard play, and that's what you're kind of seeing here. And the KU bigs were just begging for consistent scoring to some extent from the guards, I think, in this game, and really have been the last two games. You look at the last two games for KU, Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams between Colorado and Texas Tech combined have 86 points on 65.5% shooting. Now, obviously, usually big men are going to have a higher shooting percentage, duh. But when it's this stark, it's wild. 65.5% from those two, 86 points between the two of them through two games. All of the KU guards, which I'm counting the wings into, so Harris, Mayo, Coit, Griffen, Storr, that is 5 players compared to 2, 52 points over 2 games, and 31% shooting between those two. So, yeah, you're just kind of begging for big contributions. And if you would have got some big guard contributions in the Colorado game, you win by double digits, and you're not really sweating it out late. If you would have got guard contributions in this game, you probably do end up winning the game. And that matters moving forward because, yeah, guards do matter in March. And to be clear, like, I actually thought Rylan Griffen showed some good things today. Diggy Coit, you're only going to ask for so much off the bench, and he did at least hit you that big 3. But I do think this plays into number 1. Kansas losing the clutchness at home and not having the requisite guard play and guards that can score. The biggest area that I notice it in is when, like, you're playing other teams and you set a ball screen. And there's games where Dajuan Harris, gets you double-digit points. There's games where Zeke Mayo has gone off. But where teams, you set a ball screen, they go under the screen. And in past years, if they did that, it would just be an automatic fire from whatever KU's guard was. And a lot, they shot those at a pretty good rate and stuff. So I think that does matter because you look late in games, the guards are going to be the ones with the ball in their hands. And a lot of times, if you are down late in a game, you need a guard to make a quick decision and score you a quick bucket. And KU doesn't really have that luxury, right? Like, if they need a bucket, they're going to Hunter Dickinson. Well, it takes time to set that up, right? To get the ball to the big man in the post. And that makes it tougher to come back from behind in these late game situations. So I do think those two things are tied a little bit there. I also think this is the third one, and maybe this is the most pertinent. Kansas, I think, feels a little stuck in the past with how they play basketball. And whether this is something that is just tied down to what the roster construction is of this specific team that dates back to last year, or whether this is something that is starting to be an issue for Bill Self. The thing about it is, like, we've seen Bill Self have rosters that are 3-point dependent or have teams that are spaced out. The weird part is he had so much success with those teams from really the 2015-16 team through that 2017-18 team that the fact that they went away from it after that was certainly weird. That it's like, you had a lot of success here. You made 3 Elite Eights and you made a Final Four. Like, why do you go away from that? And you look at the title winning team, like, it was playing, a bunch of guards that could score. It doesn't really feel like you're doing that same thing. So I don't think that the game is passing by. I think Bill Self is still, once you get the right players in his hands, going to be an excellent basketball coach. But it certainly is a little bit of a weird thing that, like, you see the post-game comment afterwards of, like, we can't trade 2s with 3s, and it just became about them shooting all these 3s and us shooting all these students. Well, you're the one who put the roster together, so there is that certain element of that, right? And you look at it, and KU has a pass-first point guard. That is more old school, right? And again, that's the weird part. Like, KU for so many years under Bill Self had success with these kind of combo guards who could score, like Sharon Collins and Frank Mason and Devontae Graham, right? You have 2 bigs on the court who can't really shoot the basketball. I mean, this has become an even bigger problem for KU this year because Hunter Dickinson, at least last year for a stretch of time, was shooting well from 3. This year he hasn't shot well from 3. And so now it's really 2 bigs who can't shoot for you. Although Hunter can consistently hit from the mid-range, but lots of mid-range shots. And that's an area where analytically doesn't really, speak well for KU. They can't really defend the 3 ball. And that was pretty apparent against Texas Tech today. Texas Tech wants to take a lot of 3s, and they were like, we're going to take even more than normal in this game. And the crazy part about this is, like, Texas Tech shot 35% from 3. That's, like, it's a good percentage. It's not like a insane percentage that you look at and go, wow, they were just bonkers from 3. It was on an insane volume, but and honestly, that is a crazier percentage given that they had that long cold spell that they still shot 35%. But the thing is, so many of them, whether they made them or missed them, were like wide open shots for Texas Tech in this game. The 3-point defense was not good. And the end result is in a game where Texas Tech shoots, again, a solid but relatively normal 3-point percentage because of the fact that it was on such high volume. And they did not turn the ball over, which has been a thing that Kansas defense doesn't force turnovers. And because they did have at least a little mix of scoring inside because of JT Toppin mostly, that was KU's second worst defensive efficiency game of the season. The worst one was BYU, another team who can space you out and shoot threes. And so you look at it, Kansas shoots 60% on 2-point shots in this game. They had a 44-20 advantage in points in the paint. That's plus 24 points in the paint. They made more than double the amount of layups plus dunks that Tech did. And they lost a game where they trailed the game for over 34 minutes. Like, they were clearly not the better team here. And I think that's kind of the biggest one of why this happens and where things are at this point in time. Now, can they change it up with the roster construction next year? Yeah, absolutely. But we'll wait and see what ends up happening. The fourth one, and this one I don't think is as prevalent. And I don't know. I hesitate to even bring this one up because I think Hunter Dickinson overall had a pretty good game today. And he obviously just had that unbelievable performance against Colorado. He's a good player. I don't want this to be misconstrued. Hunter Dickinson is a good player who overall is a positive impact for KU, that they do not have all of the right pieces around him to make it work at the maximum level. Okay? Can we start there? At the same point in time, here's what I'm calling the Dickinson Dilemma. The dilemma is that how it affects your defense against teams like this, like Texas Tech, and also that you brought Hunter in to be the best player on the court. You brought Hunter Dickinson in, you paid all that NIL money, you had a bunch of players leave your program, you went out and got this kid because your idea was we're bringing this player in to be the best player on the court when he's out there. And I don't even know that I blame Hunter for this. Again, this is something completely different, but coming into the game on paper, JT Toppin was the best player on the court. And I think on paper, I would argue Darian Williams is probably the second best player if you were just drafting players before the game started, because he's a matchup problem for other teams that gets 15 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists per game, shoots a 3, stretches the floor. I would argue those were the two most impactful players on the court. They had both of them, right? And that's a problem if you've set your roster up to be our best player actually isn't the best player on the floor. It's like having Alex Smith. Everybody loves Alex Smith. Alex Smith was a good player, right? Alex Smith was a solid quarterback, right? Hunter Dickinson's a good player. And you can build a roster around Hunter Dickinson. You can build a roster around Alex Smith that leads to him having a lot of production and having a lot of success and making postseason, right? But this is Kansas. If you want to be elite, if you want to be a Final Four team, one of the best teams in the country throughout the season, as opposed to just, tournament level solid or a good team, do you want your best player to be the second or third best player on the floor and have certain deficiencies, but still be an overall good player? Or do you want to go out and make that move at some point and be we need Patrick Mahomes. We need that upgraded quarterback from Alex Smith. That's how I kind of feel about this. And so it's an unfortunate thing because, again, Hunter Dickinson can work if you have the right pieces around him. You go back to his freshman year at Michigan, he had Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers, two good 3-and-D wings. And they were able to make the Elite Eight, and they were one of the best teams in the country. And if not for a really bad shooting performance against UCLA, they make the Final Four, and who knows what happens for them against Gonzaga in that Final Four game. But you look at it now, and it's just it goes back to all this idea that DeJuan Harris can work too. You saw him play next to a bunch of wings, and when they had a scoring point guard coming off the bench to pair with him or play for him at certain times, and it worked. Same thing with KJ Adams. If you use him in a specific role, he started as a center on a 1-seeded NCAA tournament team. All these players can work, but then when you mix them all together, it's not the right fit altogether. And I think bottom line here, it's just tough to see this team making noise when they are inconsistent overall. And there's really one exception to the inconsistency. It's been a lack of clutch ability. That has been a consistency for this team, unfortunately. And with a lack of guard play, for March, kind of combined with that, even with Hunter and KJ playing good ball right now. Hunter Dickinson is playing good ball right now. KJ Adams is playing great ball right now. You're getting as good of pairing between those two as you have their entire time they've been together at this moment, and yet you lose this game anyway. And I hate that they wasted this KJ Adams game. It was phenomenal in so many ways. You even fouled out JT Toppin in the second half. You had him in foul trouble for a lot of the second half that helped you to hold him to 3 points in the second half. But of course, I think the hope is that, all these close losses reverse fortune for a short time for KU, like what we saw with KU football, where it's okay, maybe they're due for some close wins, and maybe they can eke out a Sweet 16 run. At this point, if you told me they're going to make a second weekend, I'd call that a success based on where we are at this point in the season. But I don't really think my opinion changed about this team today, and that is kind of a sad state to be in because, I don't know, on a certain standpoint, you don't want to overact to losses and stuff in general, but that we're at a point, at least to me, where I'm just okay, yeah, they lost to a better team. And that's not a fun place to be in for KU basketball, that the expectations have dipped to a point where it's there's a lot of teams they lose to where it's just like, okay, well, I guess that makes a little bit of sense here. So we'll see what they can do down the stretch. All right, game trophies went a little bit long in the open. Then what's next? This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online, right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. It's beyond life insurance, too. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That is meetfabric, MEET, fabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Price subject to underwriting and health questions. Thank you for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks, and don't forget to subscribe to the show. We will be back on Monday for a KU Houston preview. Don't love that that's such a short turnaround. That feels like an auto L at Houston. Who knows? Maybe they'll play as well as they did at home and then just not kind of, blow the game late, and that'd be great if they could certainly do that. If you were giving me, I don't know, whatever. If you give me the option 1-1 this final week, I'd just be like, okay, let's take it and move forward. Anyway, game trophies here. Best moments of the game. Some of the early KJ Adams dunks. Rylan Griffen's 3 that made it 51-46. It cut it to a 5-point game. I think it capped the 9-0 run for you to start the second half to get back into it. KJ had a really good save before Hunter made a shot to make it 60-57. The Diggy Coit 3 that put you up 61-60 was like, okay, here's that big vintage Allen Fieldhouse comeback in the second half, and now they're going to be able to win this game, right? And then they immediately, we'll get to that in worse moments. But anyway, there was the later one where Hunter forces the steal. KJ grabs it, dribbles it up, passes to Dajuan, who immediately throws up a lob to KJ, who throws it down for a dunk, and he got like 13 feet in the air. That made it 73-71. You were down 2. That was a really cool moment. And then when JT Toppin fouled out and it allowed Hunter Dickinson to go to the line, he made both free throws to tie the game. That was a cool moment too, where it was like you tied the game and you got their best player out of the game. Fortunately, KU was outscored, 5-0 from there to finish out the game. Worst moment of the game, I mean, in general, the 3-point defense. Watching JT Toppin be the best player on the floor when, again, that goes back to the Dickinson dilemma, who it's still a good player, but I'm looking back at last offseason when I was like, yeah, JT Toppin at this point is the best player in the transfer portal, and I would love for KU to get him. If you didn't have Hunter Dickinson, you maybe go out and get JT Toppin, or maybe you're more aggressive for a player like that, and who knows what ends up happening. And again, I don't want this to come across like I'm just blaming Hunter. I'm not. Like, I think it's more about the roster construction than anything, and Hunter did play a solid game today. It's just, one of those things. Rylan missing back-to-back gimme layups, that little lob play where they threw it to him, and he has the wide open layup on the lob, and he misses it, and then he gets it back, and then he misses again. That was no fun. So you go up 61-60 on the David Coit 3, and then Hawkins for Texas Tech scores the next 8 points for Texas Tech. He hits a 3 immediately to make it 63-61. Then you tie it at 63. He hits another 3 to make it 66-63. And then they have that nice little loose ball play where they poke it ahead and he hits the layup to make it 68-63. There was also that sequence where Hunter misses a 3 where it's like, you've not shot threes well this year. Why are you taking that one when you're down 68-63? And then he gets burned on defense for a Federico bucket to make it 70-63. Zeke Mayo dropping the ball out of bounds on the pass from Dajuan Harris. I mean, the whole game for Zeke Mayo was a struggle. We talked about the guard struggles as a whole for KU. Zeke was kind of at the pinnacle of that. And then you had the Darian Williams 3 to put them up 3, 76-73 at the other end. KU got messed up on the switch and left them open. You can't do that to a really good player who's going to be either all Big 12 first or second team this year. And then Dajuan Harris throwing the ball away. Again, this experienced 6-year point guard. How do you let that thing happen? Just kind of another bad end to the game. It feels like Dajuan has had a lot of these kind of brain fart moments at the end of games. And it's been unfortunate here for a 6-year point guard. And then I don't know what that shot attempt was from Zeke Mayo. Again, it felt like he was trying to rekindle what Javon Small did against him in Kansas. Or no, I think it was against Flory. Again, whatever. The first Big 12 game of the season. And that clearly didn't work for Kansas. There were still 9 seconds on the clock. Like, they had more time. I can understand that a little more if it was like 2 seconds, like you had to shoot it, like it is what it is. But That was no bueno in a game that was no bueno for Zeke Mayo all the way around. All right, appalling stat of the game. KU was shooting 52% at half. They were down 11. That was certainly appalling to see the difference in the styles of play. Texas Tech was plus 33 in points made off of three-pointers. That certainly is pretty appalling. And then here's the last one, and this one is pertinent to me. I mentioned the numbers of Hunter plus KJ versus the KU guards the last two games. Well, for this game specifically, the KU guards as a whole. So again, I'm counting the wings into this with Dajuan Harris, Zeke Mayo, Rylan, Griffen, Diggy Coy, and AJ Storr. 28 points between those five on 10 of 31 shooting, good for just 32%. I think that is the winner for most appalling stat of the game. Offensive MVP for KU, KJ Adams. He had 21 points, 10 of 12 from the floor. He was fantastic. He had double-digit rebounds, but if we're just talking offensive MVP, he had 5 offensive rebounds. That's what you want to see from him. He also 3 assists, 1 turnover. He was great for KU. This was probably the best game of his career. I mean, he's had some other good ones. He had a good scoring game. He didn't have a good rebounding game against Colorado, but he did both in this one. And he made so many hustle plays as well that contributed on both ends of the ball, including getting extra possessions for the offensive side of it. But if we're going to the offensive side of it here, I hope KJ continues to do that. There were a couple moments in the game where he attacked a one-on-one. And the one that's sticking out the most in my mind, I think he caught it and did like a spin move and then laid it in. And it's like, hey, if you're going to play this way, like don't be adamant or don't be, passive. If we're going to play too big basketball, they're winning if you're just sitting in the mid-range and they're sagging off you and being like, yeah, if you want to shoot it, shoot it. Attack the defense. Go into them, right? You're a strong finisher. Go at him and finish. And that's what I like to see from this game. And I hope I hope KJ continues to play like this for the rest of the season in his final games with KU. Defensive MVP, I mean, I don't know. Defense wasn't great for KU. This was their second worst defensive game of the season by efficiency. KU had only 4 steals. They had no blocks. Like everyone was giving up threes. So I don't really know that I want to pick someone. I guess if we're having to pick someone, like Texas Tech did only have 6 offensive rebounds and KJ had 8 defensive rebounds. So I guess if we want to go with KJ, he also, I've said this before. I think that the KJ is a really good defender overall and has been a good on-ball defender for KU. Even the shot that like Darian Williams hit over him on that kind of turnaround was good defense. It was just a better make. But there are certain times where he gets lost on off the ball on 3-point defense, which is the struggle of when you're playing 3 bigs or 2 bigs even against teams who want to shoot a lot of threes. And it's just difficult because everything for KU that is even good has holes in their game. So it's like Hunter Dickinson is this good player, but he has holes on the defensive end. KJ, right, has certain holes with shooting or the offensive end. Like you can go with every player. There is no like all-around player for KU, and that makes it difficult when you're putting things together. All right, what's next for KU? We'll discuss. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Prize Picks. March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. Building lineups, you can put together Jason Tatum more than 29 points, or Anthony Davis more than 12 rebounds, or whatever the good 3-point shooter is who's playing KU that week, more 3-point makes in that game. It's quick and easy. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. When you win, money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. Plus, with Taco Tuesday deals, Prize Picks even offers weekly promos where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game with Prize Picks. Finishing up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, what is next for KU basketball? It's the regular season finale week for KU, where they're going to be taking on Houston on the road. And by the way, Ken Palm right now has Houston as an 11-point favorite, which I don't know if that will be enough. And maybe I'm just in my mind, just like scars from last year because Houston beat Kansas by 30 points last season. That was the game Hunter Dickinson got hurt. It was just all around bad vibes for KU playing down in Houston. Who knows? Maybe, you could point to the loss at home to Houston to the start of this kind of downturn for KU and how that maybe mentally affected them and sent them in a tailspin. And maybe this is what they need. Maybe they just need to play Houston again and try to beat them on the road. And maybe that would be the elixir for everything. At least that's the hope. But Ken Palm only gives them a 15% chance to win that one. Ken Palm gives the Arizona game as kind of a coin flip at home. Again, like I said earlier, if you guaranteed me 1-1 right now this week where you lose it, even if you told me you're going to lose by 20 points at Houston, but you're going to beat Arizona, you're going to squeak one out to just keep the senior day streak alive, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. I'll take it because we've seen enough streaks end this year, right? Just give me that one at the very least, right? Then after that, we get the Big 12 tournament, of which at this point, like, I wonder if they're mathematically eliminated from having a first round bye. So Houston at 16-1, Arizona and Tech 13-5. So Kansas 10. So yeah, Kansas cannot get higher than the 4 seed. The 4 seed though is still in play. Iowa State's playing Arizona late tonight, and then BYU is playing West Virginia late tonight. So Kansas needs BYU and Iowa State to lose. But if BYU beats West Virginia, I believe BYU would have a 2-game lead on Kansas and the head-to-head. Now, I don't know what would happen hypothetically if there was a 3-way tie, but basically more likely than not, there's a real chance that after tonight, Kansas is with still 2 games to go. Normally, we're like, oh, has Kansas clinched the Big 12 or can they clinch the Big 12 outright? And there might be like a game to go or like a week to go. We're now at a point where there's a week to go and Kansas might, based on the results tonight, be clinched out of not even getting a first round bye, out of being not even a top 4 seed in the Big 12 with a week to go. Insanity, man. Insanity. All right. We'll preview that KU Houston game on Monday. Gulp. And we'll have a postcast for you up after that game as well. That'll do it for today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube for another edition of LOJ. See you then.